Hi, I'm ED-SKaR, and in front of me is an empty table. On the other side of the room is a shelf filled with unpainted models, and I want to show you a time-lapse of me sorting through them. Now, I've been painting models for a great deal of time, probably getting on for 2 decades now. But not every model that I acquire ends up getting painted, and this is kind of a running joke in the mini painting and wargaming community, usually referred to as the pile of shame or the pile of grey, because grey plastic never gets painted. So first of all, let's start with the orcs, because I've got more orcs than anything else, but let's also start with the biggest. This is, if you don't recognise it from this far away, an orc stomper, a mini titan equivalent from the orc side. Massive war machine of walking death and destruction. And this is one of the most recent additions to my collection, and this was a gift from Ratman. Now, we had intended to do a back to the brush special feature on this particular thing. However, due to world events, that's unfortunately not going to work out how we wanted it to. Now, you'll notice I'm moving around some of my models in these little trays, and these trays, if you don't recognise them, are the lids off of egg cartons, which are really handy and useful for moving around things such as the Blackstone Fortress collection. Again, this is relevant to Ratman because he bought them and we split them between us. I seem to have ended up with the best models. I got pretty much all of the character models, which are very nice and highly detailed. So we've looked at the largest model in my collection, and now let's look at what is probably the rarest model in my collection. And this is Mad Donna Ulantai from the old Necromunda game. A really cool model, very punk and over the top, and this is something I'm looking forward to getting around painting, but I sort of want to be in the right mood for it. I also have still in packet the old style Cal Jericho and Scabs. Cal Jericho is a comic book character set in the Necromunda universe, and Scabs is his sidekick. And now let's move on to some non-Games Workshop stuff. And I want to start off with one of the coolest ones, and that is Judge Dredd versus Death. Judge Death has appeared in quite a few Judge Dredd stories and is probably the most well-known bad guy, and this display model is really cool. Another egg box lid, we have my Frostgrave stuff. I've got the Frostgrave female soldiers, which I've used quite a few times. They are pretty cool models. But I also have some gnolls, which I need to get around to painting them up because they are also really interesting models. Kind of hyena people. I don't think I've seen that anywhere before. So let's move on to some 3D printed stuff, and strangely, I don't actually have an awful lot. And I would have expected that, given I now have access to a resin printer, thank you once again Ratman for that I would be printing off dozens and dozens every day and just non-stop. But that's not the case. I seem to be very picky about which models I want, such as this one, which is Alucard, or Dracula, as well as some 3D printed stuff from computer games. Now, this is Commander Keen from the 90s, and this is Raz from the Psychonauts games. Another one of the 3D printed ones I want to point out is another one of the Strata Miniatures wheelchair models for D&D. This particular one actually came off the printer quite badly, and I've repaired it, and hopefully I'll be featuring that in a video at some point as well. And having a poke through my unbuilt models, I have the Spec Ops team, which is definitely not a copycat of a famous television series. So here we have it, my collection, my pile of shame, my pile of opportunity, if you will. And there's maybe not as much as I thought there would be, but just the footprint of it is, well, more manageable than I thought it might be. A lot of the other people doing this sort of video showing off their massive collections have cupboards full, have rooms full of boxes and boxes and boxes of stuff, and I seem to not be leaning quite that far in that direction. And I think there are two big leading factors towards that. Number one is I actually really enjoy painting. A lot of people in the tabletop wargaming hobby like to play the game and don't necessarily like to paint the models, and so that gets put off and put off and put off because they want to play and they don't want to paint, and that's absolutely fine. I'm kind of the opposite because I like to paint and don't much get the opportunity to play, and so I do go through and paint models bit by bit. The other thing is that I'm poor and can't afford to buy vast quantities of models, but now that I've mentioned that, I did do a count of how many models there are on the table and a rough estimate at what they cost. So the count of what's on the table is 161 models. That's rather a lot. Now, I did a similar count roughly a year ago and came to 130 models. So you could say that I've increased my pile of opportunity by 30 models, but I've actually painted quite a few over the year, including I painted 32 orcs in October, plus many other models. So I don't know where they're all coming from, but I've painted at least 60 or 70 models in the last year, but I've bought or acquired or been given more than 100 in the last year. So what does all this cost then? And that's an extremely difficult question to ask. Some of these models are still available and you can buy them, and so I can just put a price tag next to it. But that's not necessarily what I paid for it. In some cases, these are gifts, and in some cases, I've bought them discounted. But adding to that, there are many models here that are not sold anymore. Some of them are very old classic models, particularly my Orc Commandos, for example. And what about the 3D printed ones? How much should I assign those? In terms of the cost of material, it's probably 10 or 15 pence each. But in terms of running the machine and the amount of time it's taken me to fix the problems and actually get successful prints, if I'm charging an hourly rate as a technician, that's going to be a lot more. And that's why you see 3D printed models on Etsy and whatever at £15, £20 each. Custom stuff is almost never about the material cost, it's about the time it takes for a person to actually make it. So I've added up all the prices of things that are still sold, I've guessed at things that are out of production, and I've come to a grand total of £450. This hobby is more expensive than I thought. And £75 of that is the listing price for this, which again was a gift. Again, I did not pay full price for most of what's on the table. But still, if I was going to go out and buy this in a shop or on Etsy or whatever, it would be £450. Now, £450 might seem like a big chunk of money, and it kind of is for someone like me. I've noticed in some of the other videos that people have done on this exact subject, checking their own piles of shame, and they are well into the multi-thousand-pound mark. So I think I've done rather well with not buying too much and then painting what I do have. So now I have to pack everything away. I'll leave you with a big question. Is there anything on the table here in front of me today that you want more information of, or you want a video of me painting? I will take requests in that regard. If people are interested in seeing something, that might give me a bit more inspiration to actually get on and paint it. As per usual, you can leave a comment in the comment section below discussing the various models that there are here, or your own piles of grey that you have access to. And so that just leaves me to say, I'm ED-SKaR, always will be, and thank you very much for watching.